grind, I wanted to show you something interesting. Well, it might not be interesting to you. You might zone out, which is totally understandable because looking inside transmissions is probably one of the more complicated things to learn about when dealing with cars. And I think even most mechanics are not well versed in what exactly is going on in a transmission. That is why usually if you have a transmission issue, most mechanic shops will tell you to replace the transmission or send it out to some kind of specialty shop that deals with just transmissions. When you open the case, this is what you see inside, and it's very scary. It's real organic. There's so much stuff going on, and it can definitely be overwhelming even for the most technical person. So what I want to do, I'm going to take everything out except for the main shaft. So this is what we have now, the main shaft, which is this whole shaft here is called the main shaft. Third and fourth gear. So these two, we'll say they're third and fourth gear. But just for the video, you can pick whatever gear you want that you like. So if you like first to second gear, pick first to second. Third or fourth, pick third or fourth. Fifth, maybe fourth to fifth, or fifth to sixth if you have 6 gears. Whatever you can easily remember, okay? I'm gonna say third gear and fourth gear, okay? These two right here. And the rest of this stuff, just ignore it. Like down here, ignore that if you can. It's hard when you see stuff like this. There's so much going on, even with it kind of emptied out like this. It's still kind of hard to just focus on these two right here. All right, we'll just focus on these two gears here. And what we're going to focus also on is this part right here. This is called a shift fork. Just think of it as a fork. It looks like this. All right, so you got just imagine you got your handle and your little fork prongs like that. All right, and the other part is this section here. This is called a selector sleeve. And when you are in neutral and you wiggle your stick, you are in between gears. So this is third gear, and this is third gear, and this is fourth gear. And if I wiggle my shifter, all right, that's kind of the play you feel when you wiggle your shifter. It's in between the gears, okay? When I shift to third gear, and you push up on third gear, okay? Or you pull down, or whatever you do, you put it in third gear. Watch this. Okay. All right, so I've moved this selector sleeve down, and now third gear is selected. If I want to select fourth gear, I move the shifter, and through the linkage, it comes through the case, and you're actually moving this what this thing is called a shift fork. So I moved the shift fork to select fourth gear. And now I'm selected fourth gear. All right. Now I want to put it into neutral, so I pull it out of the gear, like fourth gear. I wiggle my stick, and I'm in between gears. Okay. We should put some light on here so you can see properly. So when I move my shifter, I'm actually moving these shift forks inside the transmission, and I'm selecting whatever gear I need to select. All right. When I rev up my car in neutral and I'm not in any gear, I'm actually I'm spinning up this shaft. This is called the main shaft. So it's this long shaft that the gears sit on. So I'm just gonna reach underneath and I'm gonna spin it. You can't really see. So when I rev up my car, vroom, 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 this is the shaft I'm actually spinning. Okay. Now on this shaft, the gears sit, so say third and fourth, or whatever you've decided, first and second, okay? The gears are not actually connected to the shaft. They just kind of float freely on the shaft. So watch this. If I hold the shaft, wait, I can spin third gear, I can spin fourth gear freely. So when they're not selected, if I rev up the engine, the only thing that spins is this main shaft. So I'm gonna, can you see that? Here, I'll hold fourth gear, for example. So fourth gear is not putting power out to my wheels because it's not selected and it's not physically connected to this main shaft. I'm just revving my engine and the car is not going anywhere. All right. If I want to put power to my wheels, I need to select a gear. So I'm going to pick third gear and I move my shifter to third. Click. All right. Let's move this shift fork to third. Okay. Now, when I put power to the main shaft, third gear is physically connected. And power will go out to the wheels using third gear. And this is the same with first, second, third, fourth, whatever gear. Like, say this is fifth gear. Okay, you can see here, it spins freely. Whatever I do here, it's not being, the power here is not getting transferred here because I've selected third gear. Third gear, I can't hold it anymore. Still, it wants to spin. All that power goes out to the axles and then your wheels and then you're driving. All right. There's other shift forks that connect here that would move fifth gear and put power out to the other gears. Remember, when you do that little wiggle, you're just making sure it's in between gears. Okay, you're not damaging anything. It's normal, okay? So what I'm going to do is take these gears off of the shaft and we're going to look at what actually grinds when you grind a gear. And when you grind a gear, it's not these teeth here. You're not grinding the actual drive part of this gear. Alright guys, here is the shaft outside of the transmission, and this is the end the clutch goes onto. You can see here, that is where your clutch goes onto. Alright, and if you remember, this ring is what you use to actually shift in the transmission. So from your hand, all that linkage goes in the transmission and it is connected to this ring, and that is what you're moving in the transmission. So this was third gear, you're moving this down to select third gear. If this is fourth gear, you're moving it to select fourth gear. All right, so let's take these off the shaft so you can see it up close. This is missing some pieces, but you don't really need to know about all the little shims and bearings and all that nonsense for this video. So I'm going to take this apart. Alright, so this is, we'll say this is fourth gear. This is that sleeve that we use to shift and grab the gears. And alright. So, for example, this is third gear, okay? So, what I want you to notice here is this gear has the teeth on the outside and it has these little teeth on the top here. And if you look at the shape of these teeth, they are like little houses with pointed rooftops. Okay? And they're all shaped like that. And all the gears have those little teeth on the top. These ones right here. You can see how they're like sharpened at the end. They almost look like shark teeth. Okay. On this, so this is the ring, the selector sleeve that you're using to move and pick what gear you want. So if you look at this sleeve, see the shape on the inside here? It is, again, those pointy teeth, or, you know, pointy house roofs, or whatever you want to call it. So when you select a gear, these pointy teeth match up with these grooves in between each tooth here. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, maybe from this side. So they go in and they match up like that. That's a good, if we can get it to focus. Okay, so those, all those gaps and pointy tops line up with those gaps in pointed tops. All right. So when you select a gear, you move this, these line up with those gaps, slam on and grab this gear. So now this gear is fixed to the sleeve, which is fixed to the shaft. So your shaft is spinning and this sleeve is fixed to the shaft. So now you grab that gear and this gear is going to spin up to whatever you're doing with the gas pedal. So if you're revving this up and down, the car is going to rev up and down. If you're revving hard, the car is going to accelerate hard. Okay? So that's what you're doing when you grab a gear, go to shift into third. All you're doing is matching those teeth with the little teeth and picking that gear. Okay? We got to get it to focus better, actually. Just like shark teeth. All right, say you pull into a parking spot and you are in second gear. You pull in, you're in second gear, you shut the car off. All right, you get out and close your door. You realize you forgot to put your car in park. Okay, you just had it in neutral, you pulled the handbrake and you forgot to put it in park. Okay, so you go back to the car, open your door, you reach in, you don't get in to press the clutch, you reach in, shifters in neutral, and you go to put it in first gear and it doesn't go. You feel like there's resistance. All right, so what's happening is these teeth have not lined up. All right, so if this is first gear, when you go to try to put it in and it's not going, these teeth are just a little bit off. We're gonna need this to focus. They're a little bit off, like both the points are matching each other when they need to be like that to go in. So they're a little bit off and you're pushing and you can't get it in. All right, and if you're pushing and you can't get it in, you really shouldn't push it too hard. Okay, so what you do is, say this is second gear, this is first gear, you pull it back to second gear and it goes on here, right? Because you pulled in the car and shut it off in second gear. So these teeth were lined up. Okay, putting it in second gear might just shift this rod a little bit, like shift the gear a little bit and move this whole thing just a little bit. All it needs to move is a little bit, right? All this needs to move is just a little bit to get these teeth to line up. So then you push it forward to first gear and it goes. It's because these teeth weren't lined up. All right, so if you're ever practicing in your manual car with the car off and it doesn't want to go into a particular gear, it's because those teeth are a little bit off. All right, and if you try shifting it into another, you might just like rock this shaft a bit where you're able to get it to go. All right. All right, so let's talk about how this works when the car is on. So this is spinning engine speed, all right? These are spinning road speed, your wheel speed. So they'll always be turning at a different speed, all right? When you want to shift into a gear while you're driving, say from second to third, all right? When you want to shift into a gear, you need to match the speed of the gear with the main shaft speed, all right? You need to match the speed of the gear with the engine speed, with the main shaft speed. If you just try to change gears like this, these teeth are gonna grind. This is turning one speed, this is another speed, so they're just gonna grind. All right? Everyone recognizes that sound. Whether you're learning or an experienced driver, you're going to hear this sound. All right? So, how do they make the main shaft speed match the gear speed? That is with what's called the synchronizer ring. All right, so this is a synchro ring. All right, and when you're learning about manual transmission, you're going to hear all about the synchros, wearing synchros, blah, 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 synchro this, synchro that. This is what they're talking about. So if you look at this gear, the top part here, the shiny part, is actually shaped like a cone. So it's wider at the base and it narrows as it gets to the top. This part is narrower than the base. If you look at this synchro ring, again, this has those pointy, sharp teeth, like shark teeth. At the bottom, it is wider at the base than at the top. So it also is shaped like a cone on the inside. And on the inside, you'll see it has all these little sharp edges, these like serrations. And these are very sharp. This whole thing's made out of brass, I believe. And what happens here, as you press this down, just out of pressure, it wants to stick to the gear. If you release the pressure, the gear can spin freely, but as you push down, it wants to grab onto the gear. You can't, you're just gonna have to take my word for it. You can't like physically move the gear, okay? Very easily, at least. It's really grabbing onto the gear. And what it's acting like is basically a brake pad. So I think that's the easiest way to explain how these work. They are basically like brake pads for your gears, okay? When you go to press your brakes in your car, you have these two brake pads that squeeze against the brake rotor, and just out of friction, they're able to slow your brake rotor and your wheel and your car, just out of friction. And if you release that pressure, your wheel can spin freely. This is the same thing. Just out of those two cones being pressed up against each other, like that, the more pressure you push, the more friction there is, and it wants to grab onto the gear. So the goal of this ring is to help you match the speed between the engine input shaft, this main shaft that's spinning engine speed, your throttle pedal, and matching the gear speed, which is whatever your wheels are rolling at, okay? If we don't have this ring, as you go to shift, remember these points have to match up with these points. This is spinning one speed, this is spinning another speed, and you end up right? Everyone's heard that sound before, whether you are just learning, you're on day one, or you're like 35 years in, or 60 years you've been driving manual transmission. Everyone's heard when your gear doesn't engage properly, okay? So the purpose of this is to match up this gear and allow this sleeve to slow down and lock on. All right, so it synchronizes these teeth with the teeth on the top of the gear. So there are 3 sets of teeth here, okay? There's a teeth on the synchro ring, teeth on the gear, and teeth on your selector sleeve. Remember, this is what you're using to shift gears. So when this grabs onto the gear, when this synchro ring grabs onto the gear, it slows it down to allow your selector sleeve to match up, slide in between those teeth, and then grab onto the gear without you grinding gears, because the speed between the main shaft and your gears are now synchronized. All right, so let's take a look at the synchro spring, which is just as important as any of the other pieces, and it's one part no one ever really talks about. So here you have your gear, all right? Here you have the synchro ring. And remember, this has to be pushed down in some way to create that friction to grab onto the gear. If we just try to slide the selector sleeve on, it will just fall. It just falls down. There's no actual pressure being put on the synchro ring. You can see here, the teeth actually just fall in place. Everything's real loose. We want to put some pressure on the synchro ring to slow down this gear. And the way you do that is with this synchro spring. And it looks like a hoop earring, like the cheap one that causes you ear irritation. That's a kind. It's just a metal steel ring. And we put it on. Oh, it's like a bracelet, probably. All right. So we put it on there, and you can see it's on there, and it just sits on top. So now we take the selector sleeve and try to slide it on. Remember, before it would just slide on easy. There's no real friction or anything. This ring, this steel ring, is going to have to be compressed, and that is going to force the synchro ring. It's going to push it down and create the friction to slow down or speed up your gear with your main shaft, your engine speed. So here you can see here. You can see how the selector sleeve teeth are rubbing up against that spring. It doesn't want to fall in place anymore. You actually have to push it in place, and then it goes down. All right, you can kind of see here the teeth now rub up against that spring, and to push the sleeve down you have to kind of compress it. And that causes the friction that pushes the synchro ring down onto the gear. So if you are having problems with gear grinding, okay, it could be your synchro ring is worn down, it could be broken and not actually creating the pressure to push the synchro up against the gear to slow the gear down and help match it with your engine speed. So that is one thing that could be broken, damaged, or worn down. The other thing could be your synchro itself. So instead of being tight on here, it could be worn out here and it'll fit real loose. So just for example, this is a bigger synchro, and if I put it on, it fits real loose. It doesn't matter how much I press on the synchro, it will never create pressure to grab onto the gear. So if the synchro is worn out, the higher engine speeds, for sure, you're going to have trouble going into those gears. You may even have to pull the shifter out, push it back in, and then it will go. It could be because the synchro is being pushed down once, it's not able to slow it down. You pull it out, press on it again, and it grabs it at a little bit of a slower speed. All right. Now the other issue you could encounter is that your gears go into gear okay, but they grind. So these are actually from my car, and the synchro is fine. Okay. The teeth on the gear, they're fine. Okay, they're not that sharp like a new gear, but they're fine. They still have their points on them. I want you to listen to this video from my car, and it is, I believe, second to third gear and third gear to fourth gear. You can actually hear the sleeve going on and grinding a bit and then going into gear. So there's really fast grind and then it goes into gear, grind and it goes into gear. You'll hear it on the video now that you're familiar with the sound. So the teeth on this synchro ring is fine. The synchro is pretty tight. The teeth on the gear are tight, but let me show you the actual teeth on the sleeve. This is how they're supposed to look like, sharp, like that. Instead, they look like this. So you can see here. Let me put the other one side by side. No. You can see these are how it's supposed to look like. These ones have been rounded off. They're all kind of flattened out. They've been ground down. So here's the other side. Because remember, one side is for one gear. As you move up, the other side's another gear. So the other side, you can see they've been chewed up, and they're no longer that sharp point. They're like a flat roof. So as these get damaged more, you're going to have more trouble lining these points up, which are no longer there, with the points on the gear teeth. It might grind and then go. It might not go at all. You might have to pull it out of gear, push it back in. So that is a different way you could have some kind of gear problems as well. All right, remember the synchro is there to match up your gear speed with your input shaft speed, And it's kind of like those people who run to catch a train. They have to run real fast to match up with the entrance on the train and jump in. This is kind of like that. What is rev matching though? Rev matching is, instead of waiting for the synchro to grab and slow down or speed up the gear, you actually speed up this shift selector. So when you rev, you speed it up to match the speed of the gear. And then it kind of bypasses the synchro and goes on. But it really won't ever truly bypass it, because remember the synchro spring? It doesn't matter what speed you try to rev match this up to, or what speed the gear is going to. This always has to press onto the synchro spring, okay, which will always exert some kind of pressure on the gear. So there still is going to be some wear on the synchro. So that is all rev matching is that you're revving the engine up to match these teeth with these teeth. And you could do that even if you didn't have your synchro or it wasn't working properly. So that is all rev matching is. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to learn rev matching so these can match speeds just to save wear? I don't know about that. I don't think it is. You know, if you want to go to the grocery store to buy bananas, do you need to learn how to rev match? No. If your grandma wants to drive your car, does she need to learn how to blip the throttle and bang gears? No. So why do you have to do that to go to the grocery store or to go to school or to do whatever else you want to do in regular everyday driving just to try to save this? I don't think so. This thing is like 30 years old and it's fine, right? So that is, I think that's it. All right, when you're watching this video, you don't have to learn about this stuff. You absolutely do not have to know anything about this stuff. It is very confusing, and even very knowledgeable car people do not. There's more people who don't understand this stuff than do understand it. So for you, someone just learning how to drive stick shift, you don't have to know this stuff at all. It's not important, and you can learn how to drive a stick without knowing this stuff. That being said, I hope it is helpful for those who are interested, and it is probably going to be a longer video, but you know, I talk a little bit slower, so you can speed it up on the settings, I think, but but that's what it is.